At the moment, we're really in a kind of crisis situation in many places. So it's about getting through the next few months. So if that's, airdropping food, as I said, then that means that's what we'll do. But you're right that it's absolutely about ensuring a kind of sustainability and for the long term.
So the recent topic of discussion at the United Nations has been the four-nation food crisis. But what has led to this food crisis in Somalia, South Sudan, Yemen and Nigeria?
Indeed, you're absolutely correct. The UN has said that there's about 20 million people at risk of starvation. What we see in each of these countries is very, very worrying levels of, indeed, malnutrition in different places. And the causes are very different, actually. So although, as you say, it's a four-nation food crisis, the reasons for the crisis in each of the countries, Somalia, South Sudan, Nigeria and Yemen, are very different. But I think what connects all of them is armed conflict. There's been a conflict going on in the Lake Chad Basin region for 8 years now. Somalia has been racked by conflict for decades. There's a very difficult situation in Yemen with a humanitarian crisis caused by the conflict which started in 2013. So I think the situation that we find ourselves in is one where it's a combination of conflict and drought, which means that people find it extremely difficult to farm, to earn a living, and their everyday lives are disrupted, which has caused this crisis and which means the international community really needs to react very quickly.
Now, with all this political turmoil and conflict, how has your organisation helped the situation?
Well, the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, we're on the ground in each of these countries and many more besides, working to deliver basic aid to the populations, the people in need in different places. So that's food, water, medical care, basic assistance, fixing the water supply when it breaks, all these kinds of things. And it's worth noting that we've been there for actually a long time. We've seen the suffering in these places and we've seen the kind of suffering that this long-term conflict can really impact on the population. Agricultural land is contaminated with explosives. Livestock are dying because of there's no water. So this combination of factors means that it's just extremely difficult. So we do what we can. We can't solve the problem, absolutely. It's only a sticking plaster. But humanitarian aid can help get those people get through, the most difficult days. And as we approach the summer, the situation is becoming more and more urgent to act really very quickly. So we've asked our donors for 400 million Swiss francs, that's about 400 million euros for this year for our programs in these countries. And that's increased on last year just because of the scale of the needs are so massive and the need to really scale up quickly and bring more aid to these places.
Now, a big problem is safety. And getting humanitarian aid on the ground is a big issue. But how do you ensure that the food and the other products get into the right hands and don't get into the wrong hands?
Well, we would say that anyone who needs it is the right hands as such. So we don't discriminate on the basis of who anyone is. We provide aid impartially and independently to everyone who needs it. But that's a very good question about humanitarian access is indeed a very difficult challenge everywhere that we work. Particularly, we're often constrained when we're working in conflict zones as the ICRC. That's our special role. So it really depends on the situation. In South Sudan, for example, the problem is often that there's simply the roads are very, very poor, especially when there's a lot of rain. There's just no way that you can get in trucks with aid. So what we do is we airdrop food from aeroplanes to really inaccessible places. Now, this is very expensive, in fact, but the situation is such that the desperation is such that it demands it. Whereas in other places, let's say in Yemen, there's a lot of restrictions on the kind of products that you can bring into the country. So it's more a question of negotiating with the authorities. And this is part of one of the issues one of the messages we want to pass to states and the international community is it's not just food, it's not just money that we need. We also need political solutions and we need diplomatic pressure to be placed on states and anyone who might have an influence in these places to make sure that humanitarian access is granted and that we and other organizations can go and bring the aid to people that need it.
Now, my final question is, how can we ensure that they have a sustainable food source and it's not just relying on aid?
That's a very good question and a very pertinent one. I think that at the moment we're really in a kind of crisis situation in many places. So it's about getting through the next few months. So if that's airdropping food, as I said, then that means that's what we'll do. But you're right that it's absolutely about ensuring a kind of sustainability and for the long term. So in addition to just food, we also provide things like agricultural supplies, seeds, tools, these kinds of things. But as I said before, I think it's partly about just security. If you can't go out of your house to farm your land, then no amount of agricultural supplies will make any difference. If you're just being displaced once, twice, 3 times, then how on earth are you going to earn a living? So when we come back around always is to the issue of the conflicts themselves. Until the conflicts can be solved, there is really no way to guarantee a sustainable food source for all of these people. And that's where we need to see action. 1, in hopefully putting an end to the conflicts. And 2, in making sure that when wars are being fought, they're fought according to the rules of international humanitarian law. That's the laws of war. That means sparing civilians, not attacking hospitals, not attacking schools, all these kinds of basic rules which will, war is always extreme. War is always a tragedy, but what we do is we ask that the people who are fighting the wars carry out their military operations in such a way as that civilians are spared and that they can continue their lives as far as possible in this very difficult situation.
Well, thank you so much for joining us in the studio and speaking on this topic.
Thank you.
And thank you at home for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more interviews like this.